My name is Ethan, I'm 32, and for most of my life, my relatives figured I'd always be the type to back down when trouble brewed. The reserved one? The easygoing one. The person who avoids confrontation at all costs. And perhaps I once fit that description. But when my grandparents died and bequeathed their whole inheritance to me, the home, the bank accounts, and the investments, totaling just shy of $900,000, something deep within me changed. I began observing more carefully. I started paying closer attention to conversations. And above all, I began strategizing, because I understood precisely the kind of relatives I had. My brother Dylan is 3 years my junior, showy, boisterous, magnetic, the sort of man who can deceive you outright and still convince you to lend him $5,000 for a guaranteed venture. He'd escaped consequences so many times over the years. Credit accounts opened in our mother's name, a loaned vehicle that mysteriously disappeared. And each occasion, Mom rescued him, claimed he was simply finding his way. But for me, I was forever supposed to be the dependable one, the fallback option, the cushion. And I had grown tired of fulfilling that function. When Grandpa died 2 years ago, a year following Grandma, he left the entire inheritance exclusively to me. It didn't shock me. I had been their primary caregiver when nobody else even phoned, let alone stopped by. I transported them to medical visits, handled the shopping, dealt with the endless forms. Dylan, he'd appear on Christmas Day, snap pictures for social media, and disappear until the following celebration. But when the will was read and my name stood alone, I noticed the expression my mother gave me. That pursed lip, resentful grimace, as though I had seized something that belonged elsewhere. That instant made me realize the conflict was approaching. The house was the centerpiece. A stunning vintage Victorian with rich red bricks, high windows and vines climbing the walls like a scene from a film. It was a heritage property, handed down across 3 generations, and my grandparents had maintained it in almost flawless shape. The area had skyrocketed in worth over the past 10 years. Every neighboring home had been renovated and sold for profit. But my grandparents held firm, and now it belonged to me. I didn't relocate immediately. I retained my apartment on the other side of town and discreetly handled the necessary arrangements. I had the property valued, consulted an inheritance lawyer, and established a trust, not solely for the house, for all of it. I kept it secret from everyone, not Dylan, not Mom, nobody. I stored the original deed in a safe place and transferred the full property ownership, assets, and funds into an irrevocable trust with myself as the sole trustee. I even shifted the utilities to a company name linked to the trust. It involved additional costs, but I didn't mind. I knew my relatives too well. I anticipated their attempts. For a time, things remained calm, too calm. Dylan messaged occasionally, inquiring if he could use the pool. There isn't one. Mom made subtle comments about how unjust it was to leave everything to a single individual. She even remarked, "Well, your brother was always Grandpa's favorite, you know," as if that carried weight. I simply nodded and shifted topics. I avoided debates. I didn't correct them. I allowed them to assume I was gullible, that I hadn't safeguarded anything. The real strain began last month. Dylan started sharing cryptic updates on social media, major developments ahead, new phase incoming, that sort of thing. Then one Saturday, I was at the house tending the lawn. Nothing elaborate, just maintaining the grounds, when Mom's car entered the driveway. Dylan emerged first, beaming and wearing shades as if arriving for a photo shoot. Mom followed, holding a clipboard and smiling, like she was inaugurating a real estate project. "Hey, bro," Dylan said, slapping my shoulder. "We've got updates." I merely raised an eyebrow. "We?" Mom approached. "We consulted a lawyer. It seems the house was meant for both of you. Your grandfather erred by not revising the will after your grandmother's passing. But rest assured, we've taken care of it." I gazed at her. "Taken care of what precisely?" Dylan retrieved a folded document from his pocket and brandished it. "We got the title switched to my name. It's finalized. You'll have to vacate by Friday, but no grudges, okay? We'll allow you time to collect your belongings." I remained silent for a beat. Just observed them, shifting my gaze from one to the other, absorbing their arrogant expressions, the sheer boldness. My pulse stayed steady, no anxiety. Truthfully, I nearly chuckled, because they genuinely believed I was that foolish. I offered a faint smile. Subtle, Courteous, the type that unsettles people. You truly think I'd permit that? Dylan chuckled as if I'd cracked a joke. It's happening already, man. You've been daydreaming too long. Mom interjected, adopting a gentler voice as though it might sway me. We're not aiming to hurt you, Ethan. It's merely sensible. Dylan can oversee the property, perhaps renovate and sell. You have your own residence regardless. This benefits everyone. I didn't debate. I simply nodded gradually and replied, understood. 2 days later, they returned, now with a rental truck and 2 hired workers. I'd anticipated it. They drove in as if they owned it, joking and calling out. Dylan sat in the passenger side, drinking coffee, while Mom guided the workers to the entrance, but then they noticed the porch. I stood there, arms folded, next to a tall gentleman in a dark suit. He carried a hefty binder and had an official badge on his belt. The binder bore the trust's name, one they didn't yet know. The badge was authentic. The suit was authentic. And the man? He worked for the county property records department. They halted. Dylan exited first, puzzled. What's this about? I said nothing. The suited man spoke. The individual beside me, Mr. Harlan, cleared his throat with the composed confidence of someone accustomed to such scenes. He held the binder under one arm and reviewed the page before him, then addressed them in a steady, impartial voice. Are you Dylan Reed? He inquired. Dylan scowled, evidently unsettled. Yes, who wants to know? Mr. Harlan advanced a step. I'm from the County Property Records Office. I'm present representing the lawful trustee of the Willowcrest property. That's this residence. He gestured toward the house. I possess records indicating the deed has resided in a trust since April last year. Managed by Ethan Reed. Any assertions? Regarding ownership changes. After that point, including a deceitful title switch, are not only void but subject to criminal prosecution. Dylan's complexion paled noticeably. Deceitful, he repeated, glancing at Mom. What does that mean? Mom advanced, lips pressed thin. There has to be an error. We reviewed the previous deed. It remained in Grandpa's name. We thought. You thought incorrectly, I interjected, speaking at last. I never kept the property solely in my personal name. It's held by a trust. That's why no public records showed anything. You visited some dubious title. Service and attempted a false transfer using obsolete paperwork. Mr. Harlan confirmed with a nod. I've submitted a fraud alert on the bogus claim. Typically, we'd issue a notice first. But considering the situation, arriving with movers, attempting forced entry, seeking to remove the trustee, we're proceeding directly to action. Dylan stared blankly. Action. I turned toward him and clarified. It means stepping inside without my approval constitutes trespassing, and interfering with the trust or assets invites multiple charges. For an extended, uncomfortable moment, silence prevailed. The workers stood midway between truck and porch, exchanging glances, as if they'd entered a family battlefield. One cleared his throat and retreated toward the vehicle. Dylan eventually spoke. You're really turning on your own blood. My tone remained even, almost serene. Blood? You arrived with fake paperwork and movers. You tried to take my home. The one Grandpa and Grandma intended for me. Don't lecture me on blood. Mom's expression hardened. They were mistaken, Ethan. They didn't realize. No, I cut in firmly. You didn't realize. You assumed I'd remain the doormat from my 20s. The son you could pressure into sacrificing weekends for Dylan's messes, or lend money because you needed it temporarily. But I'm not that person now. I grew wiser, I observed, and I readied myself. Mr. Harlan continued, leafing through the binder. Additionally, to be explicit, we've notified the police department. Any return pretending ownership claims will trigger prepared filings, both civil and criminal. Dylan's gaze flared, but he stayed quiet. He spun to the workers and barked, We're done! Let's go. He avoided my eyes. Mom hesitated briefly, lips parted as if preparing another tactic, but no words emerged. She trailed him silently. The truck departed, and I watched the rear lights fade down the street. Silence returned. That profound quiet after a long, simmering clash. Mr. Harlan gave me copies of the report and said, Contact me if they return. I expressed gratitude, and once he departed, I lingered on the porch where I'd once sat with Grandpa, hearing him discuss understanding people truly, not by their statements in isolation, but by their actions when they believe no one's observing. He was correct. I'd observed, and I'd finally responded. But that wasn't the conclusion, because 3 days on, I received a typed, official letter from another attorney, retained by my mother. It alleged emotional suffering and contended that, as a direct relative, she held a moral and family entitlement to part of the inheritance. She sought payment for the psychological pain of exclusion, including a detailed list of requested remedies: $150,000 cash, shared ownership of the family residence, and ongoing monthly support indefinitely. I read the document multiple times in quiet, initially trying to rationalize it, hoping it wasn't as it appeared. But by the 6th pass, denial was impossible. My mother had signed legal letterhead demanding payment for failing to allow her and Dylan to seize what my grandparents left me. It wasn't the sum that enraged me, it was the audacity. The nerve to label it a mix-up one day, then formally request $150,000 the next, treating it like a corporate negotiation. And the term that lingered was familial, duty, as though obligation ran solely toward them, as if I existed to provide and they to receive. I didn't reply right away. I knew better than emotional reactions. I contacted Mr. Harlan, who connected me with a skilled inheritance lawyer named Laura Vance. She was in her early 40s, gentle in speech but intensely precise, the type who never bluffed because facts sufficed. I provided her all materials: trust papers, the demand letter, screenshots of messages, and Dylan's social posts about his new era. In a day, Laura issued a cease and desist to both. The intent was unambiguous. The trust taker was ironclad, legally protected, no valid claim. But Laura dug further. She uncovered Dylan's multiple forged signatures on the false title. He'd used a counterfeit notary seal and submitted via a questionable online service in another state, assuming local records wouldn't catch it. Laura reached a fraud examiner at the DA's office. That service was already under scrutiny for similar fakes. Dylan had become an easy target.